Now we will try to elaborate more on maybe why we're saying the, the central focus of all these stories in the Old Testament is about the house of David. The house of David being elevated, divinely appointed to be the ones who um, who restore humanity into the image of God, or one can say to be the image reminders of the image of God. In other words, when you see kings, you are reminded they are an image that reminds Israel that this is what the image of God should look like, so that God may establish his presence with humanity. Now, um, an interesting observation is how the writers structured the books, particularly the first books of the Bible. We call them the Pentateuch, but we'll focus more on Genesis first. There is a word that is used. In Hebrew, it's called the Toledot. Toledot. The English translators, although some have proposed different meanings of the word, I believe that the word means origins, but I will not go to that. In fact, if I say origins, I'm using an abstract language. So if I would use a language that will be used by the Israelites or the Old Testament audience, will be what was brought forth. Remember, when I talk about an abstract language, our language is, particularly English, are more abstract. What do I mean? Abstract and concrete. For example, if you're using an abstract language, you're talking about a can of drink or soft drink. That's more of an abstract. But if you want to see or to use a concrete language, talking about the same thing, the can of soft drink, you would say a container, because an abstract language, a concrete language gives you a picture that this contains something. So the Hebrew language is more pictorial. It gives you an idea or a picture of what the author is talking about. So that's why I say, I believe maybe if you put it abstractly, the term Toledot means origins, but according to the audience, probably they will say what was brought forth by so and so. Now, but let's look at English translations. They use the word the account of. Sometimes they use the word the generations of. Sometimes they use the word the descendants of, depending on which translations or which translation you are using. But I will give you these verses so that you are able to see what I'm talking about. The first one will be on Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. These are the accounts of the heavens and earth. Then it tells the story of humanity. You go to Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. This is the Toledot of Adam. These are the accounts of Adam. Then it gives you the story of the sons of Adam, focusing on one particular son, on one particular line, Seth, the Sethite line, and ignores the line of Cain. And then Genesis chapter 6, I want you to go and view these passages. Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, the accounts of Noah. Genesis chapter 10, verse 1, again, the accounts of the sons of Noah. Genesis chapter 11, verse 10, the account of Shem, one of the sons of Noah. In other words, now the writer looks at one son of Noah because the storyline is going to take that route. And then Genesis chapter 11, verse 10. That's Shem. Then Genesis chapter 11, verse 27. It is the Toledoth, or the account of Terah. Terah is the father of Abraham, and the story will be the story of Abraham. Then the next Toledoth will be on Genesis chapter 25, verse 12, focusing on Ishmael. Genesis chapter 25, verse 19, focusing on Isaac. And then Genesis chapter 36, verse 1, focusing on Esau. Genesis chapter 36, verse 9, a repetition of the focus on Esau, but generally focusing on the Edomites, because remember, Esau is the father of the Edomites. And then the last one is on Genesis chapter 37, verse 2. That is the Toledoth of Jacob, or the account of Jacob, what was brought forth by the story of Jacob. So now that one is focusing on Israel, on the sons of Jacob, the 12 sons. Remember, from chapter 37 to 50, it's more of Joseph episode, and in light of other brothers as well, or in relation with other brothers, which is that Toledo is focusing on Israel. That's the last one from the book of Genesis. That's how the book of Genesis is structured. These Toledoths, or these accounts, are 11 if you count them. I've given you the verses. It's about 11 of them. Now, these are called Toledoth formulas. Why? Because the Toledoth, or this statement, or this phrase, the account, these are the accounts of, it's kind of a formula that is used by the writer in arranging these narratives, these stories. And this Toledoth is a heading. It's a heading of a new section. In other words, when the writer is introducing a new section, he will say, these are the accounts of so-and-so, L.A., Toledoth, Adam, something like that. Now, one of the things that one probably will notice is that some of these Toledoths, or accounts, they begin with the word "and." Some, they just say, these are the accounts of so-and-so. Some will say, and these are the accounts of so-and-so. I'm not sure in the English translations if they come out clear, but when you read the Hebrew Bible, you can see the "and" in the beginning. In other Toledoths. In others, you don't see the "and." So others will say, L.A. Toledoth, so-and-so. These are the accounts of so-and-so. But in other accounts, it will say, Ve L.A. Toledoth, so-and-so. So it's like, and these are the accounts of so-and-so. Now, what is happening here? The writer has major headings. When the writer has a major heading, there will not be an "and" in the beginning. He's starting a new section and a whole new story. But when the Toledoth has an "and" in the beginning, Ver L.A. Toledoth, that will be, we will call it a secondary heading. In other words, it's a heading that introduces a new story, but that story belongs to this bigger story under this main or major heading. So, if I would give you these major headings, I'll just say major headings, then you'll know that when I talk about the major headings, it means that there is no "and" in the beginning. The first story, Genesis chapter 2, it is the major heading, story of humanity, focusing on Noah. Now, one of the things that I'll try to introduce now is the concept of the narrowing focus. In other words, the story starts with humanity, and as the Toledots moves forward, then the focus is narrowing to a certain, to up to one story, that is the last Toledot, Israel. So, the first story, major heading, chapter 2, Genesis. The second story, the story of Adam or Seth, because the focus is on Seth, it's a major heading. The story of the flood in chapter 6, it's a major heading. But in chapter 10, now there is a vav, a very Toledo. That means the Toledo of chapter 10, verse 1, belongs to chapter 6. The major heading is still the flood narrative, still the story of Noah, but now the story was focusing on the flood in chapter 6. Now in chapter 10, it zooms in and looks at the sons of Noah. So that story belongs to that one. Now, another one, which is the one before last, major heading, is chapter 11, verse 10. That's the major heading before last. Chapter 11, verse 10, it is the Toledo of Shem. It's about the Shemites now. Now, the story of Abraham, amazingly, many writers will see the story of Abraham as if it's a new story that starts something. But it looks like, in fact, the story of Abraham, the Toledo in chapter 11, verse 27, it has a vav. It's a very early Toledo. And the account of Terah, which means the story of Abraham and the following stories, all of them, they are not major headings, they are subheadings. They belong to this major story of chapter 11, verse 10. It is the story of Shem, the Shemite story. Why is it like that? This is because Abraham is going to be the father of many nations. So I think the authors, they don't want us to miss that although the story is about Abraham, but Abraham was the father of many nations. The Edomites, the Ishmaelites, they all come from the line, or they come through the covenant of God and Abraham, making him the father of many nations. So these can be seen as all these stories they belong to the Shemite story. Then the last Toledo is on chapter 37. That's the major heading. It doesn't have an end. So now the author began with the story of humanity, with Adam, and he focused on his son Seth, left the other line of Adam, and then he focused on Noah. In the sons of Seth, he focuses on Noah, and in the sons of Noah, he focuses on Shem. And then after the Shemite story, which includes the Abraham and others, and other sons of Abraham, or those who are associated with Abraham, the last narrowing focus is Israel. That's where the story of Genesis ends. From now on, at the end of Genesis, the story is going to be about Israel, the Toledo of Jacob, or the Toledo of Israel. So in the next video, we will continue and see if are there any other accounts or Toledos that we see outside of Genesis, because many people, they focus on Genesis. Genesis is the major one that has all these Toledos that are 11 of them. So my argument is that outside of this one, you only find 2 Toledos. So we'll look at them and then focus on the story of Cain.